Okay, we are now moving to Roadway. This looks familiar. It looks like Logan and Wade talked about what image they were going to put up here. So our next presenter is Wade Coatney, and he is a senior hydraulics engineer, correct? From Region 4. So take it away.
Good afternoon. Can everyone hear me? Cool. Well, I'm here to discuss Roadway's role in project delivery. Before I get into that too much, I thought I'd give you a little background on myself. Considering I am currently the region hydraulics engineer, you may wonder how I'm here talking about Roadway. I've been with ODOT for about 11 years, and I've been in project delivery for about 10 of that. I've spent my entire project delivery career in Roadway, and in Region 4, hydraulics is a part of Roadway. So I've been doing partial Roadway, partial hydraulics for the majority of my career. In addition to that, I've done 2 rotations in construction, so the total career, about 11 years in ODOT. You may wonder, what does Roadway do? Roadway design, right? Plans, specs, and estimate, just like every other unit. And why do you care? Well, Roadway is unique because we have a bigger impact on all disciplines than the other unit. We help drive the project forward through coordination, 3D design, and just our general role on the project team. Before I get into our general roles in project delivery, I do want to preface this with the fact that we are currently working through a statewide QA/QC process, and some of our roles may be tweaked compared to what's here. We still have the responsibilities, but the roles may be tweaked depending on how that fleshes out between us and other units. So first, scoping. Roadway is a part of scoping, just like every other unit. We help refine the scope, we document our roadway assumptions, we identify the design criteria and standards that are used for the project. Most units use this design criteria in a part of their scoping as well. And we also try to inform the TPM of any missing resources based on impacts to the project scope. Not uncommon that you don't have everyone at the table during scoping or project delivery, so we do our best because we do have the impact on everyone else. Probably the one you care about the most, contract plan development. Roadway designs and produces contract documents for the roadway portion of STIP projects from project initiation through bidding. The plan sheets that we're responsible for, the title sheet, the index, the details, the typical sections, the general construction sheets, and often the drainage and utility sheets. In addition to this, we are responsible for creating those design standards and criteria or confirming them based on what was presented at scoping. And this includes the design speed and the 1R, 3R, 4R determination. I think those are the ones that project leaders care about the most. So, TPMs. I'll do that a lot during this speech. The next thing we're responsible for is compiling the plan specs and estimate at each delivery. The specifications writer is responsible for compiling the estimate and the specifications. And in most regions, the specifications don't come until advanced plans. And then the roadway designer and/or drafter, depending on your region, is responsible for compiling all the plans from each unit. Construction support. Roadway provides construction support through the entire process of construction, including starting and bidding. We do assist and/or write addendum for construction during the bidding process. We assist construction in writing CCOs. Oftentimes we provide the documentation they use to do this. And we, most importantly, provide and coordinate the construction survey handoff package. A lot of people don't know what all this entails. I'll go a little bit more into detail on that later on. In addition to this, we also review outsourced projects. Project leaders care because we provide technical guidance and assistance in determination of design standards and design exceptions for our consultant partners. We'd, in addition, review those designs for fatal flaws in just general project design. Roadway projects. Someone from Roadway is involved in every STIP project that goes out the door. In general, Roadway is the lead on pavement preservation, modernization, urban streetscape, interchange, safety projects, and ADA projects. We can be the lead on bridges and culverts. It really depends on what that kind of project is. But these generally are the projects we're involved in, and anything else that goes out the door, but generally the lead in this set. So you may ask yourself, who is in roadway? First, obviously the roadway designer. This person performs the roadway design and is engaged throughout the entire project. Generally, it's the biggest point of contact for the TPM from the roadway unit. Next is the spec writer. Spec writer is probably the next point of contact for the TPMs, and definitely their later point of contact later in the project. They're not typically involved too much until advanced plans once we start putting out specifications, but they do provide estimates at every plan set and are responsible for the draft construction schedule when we go to the DAP phase gate now. Next is the drafter. The drafter utilizes MicroStation for drafting support to designers while producing plan sets. They also are involved in drafting exhibits for support of different units. This person usually works with the roadway designer and generally has little communication with the TPMs, but depending on your relationship with your roadway unit, you may be able to go directly to your drafter to request exhibits, but would expect it to go through the roadway designer. Next is the roadway manager. Typically, the roadway manager doesn't engage too much with TPMs, with the exception of coordinating resourcing and scheduling. Depending on your unit and how you function, this can be done monthly or just as needed. You just depends on who you are and how your region functions. In addition to this, the roadway manager reviews the plans at every distribution. They approve or concur with design exceptions in region, and they concur with the design criteria. Additionally, they sign off at the DAP and PS&E phases. I think everyone's probably familiar with those, but just wanted to know all the roles that they provide. In addition to these four slots that are always in roadway, there are certain positions that can be housed in roadway, and that really depends on your region. The other units that can be there are traffic control, hydraulics, striping, and erosion and sediment control. So if you're looking for people on your project teams, definitely be sure you know who's housed in what area in your regions. Roadway engineering design responsibilities. So I've kind of noted it before, but roadway kind of does set the design criteria and standards for the project, that 1R, 3R, design speed, the clear zone, stopping site distance. I think those are probably the ones that most everyone cares about. We do have a slew of others, and as we work through our QA/QC process, there is a formal document now that roadway managers are required to sign off on moving forward. That document hasn't fully been created, but come next spring, you should start seeing these at project initiation. So roadway is responsible for the roadway geometry, which includes your horizontal and vertical alignments in conjunction with your super elevation. This has impacts to pretty much every project team delivery member and really does set the basis for the design of the project. Roadside safety and barrier design generally includes your clear zone, intersection site distance, and barrier layouts. So we are determining what your guardrail is, where it goes, and where your concrete barrier goes, those sorts of things to protect the public from roadside hazards. Lane configurations, lane shoulder widths, tapers, these are all things that are under our design responsibilities, but there is a major coordination with traffic on these. Depends on ADT and volumes and where your locations are. Intersection layout, we really care about radii, skew, and profile of the intersections and whether or not it's urban versus rural. And when you're in urban settings, you're really worried about the ADA portion of things and how vehicles make it through those intersections in that respect. And then in rural areas, we're definitely more worried about turning radiuses for larger vehicles to get through those intersections. We do have trucking industry partners, mobility partners, where they really care about those wider intersections. So our intersection layouts vary in what we're looking for in each area. Interchange layouts, those generally impact all units. I think everyone knows what an interchange is, but it really has full impacts everywhere. And ADA, we definitely have a hot topic item for ODOT now, and that's becoming very, very time intensive on the design side of things. It does include coordination with traffic on this as well, and the fact that where push buttons go and with crosswalk closures. So Roadway determines, recommends whether or not we would close a crosswalk, but traffic is the one who submits it. So we provide the background documentation to these people. And in addition, as we kind of noted before, Roadway can take on small drainage design, erosion control, staging, and striping. Kind of redundant, I know, but it's unique to each region. Roadway engineering deliverables, and timelines. In the project initiation phase, the survey request and API kind of run similarly, but they have two different end users. So when you look at the survey request, usually Roadway is the one that needs the biggest footprint of anyone. So we're requesting the most data from survey. So usually we're kind of the ones that start off that kickoff of the survey request of what goes into it, and then other units are adding pieces onto it. I can definitely say in different regions, even with different project leaders, how this gets put together is different. But usually Roadway starts off by showing everyone what they need, and everyone else adds their pieces. And then the end user obviously is the survey unit. API, very similar, where we're producing that similar document, but the end user ends up being your region environmental coordinators. So, and then project initiation, we're also should see that project design criteria and standards right up front, so everyone on the project team really knows what this project is about. The kind of the pre-DAP time frame, we'll call it the interchange layout sheet. The interchange layout sheets are provided to tech services and have to be approved. And you need to have these approved really before you start moving into your full-blown DAP design. We don't have that many interchanges anymore, but when we do, we need to be sure that those are approved before we start designing towards it. And then coming into DAP, Roadway is responsible for their portion of the DAP design narrative. That is a slight difference to what it used to be in the past, but I think everyone here is familiar with the new sheets, the new design narratives for all units, and so we're just responsible for our portions of that. The draft construction schedule, this again is somewhat new. The draft construction schedule is being created by the spec writer based on the bid items and quantities at that DAP estimate, and this is required for your DAP phase gates. Calc books and design exceptions. These all kind of go together. So generally what Roadway does is they do a draft calc book, and based on this calc book is where we're kind of creating our design exceptions from. So these two are kind of tied hand in hand. And then I will note, like for each stage, we do have certain files that are required for each stage. One of them is a 3D design file. So as we do our 3D modeling, this kind of gets passed off between the different units. And depending on what unit you are, you need different 3D design files at different stages. But we produce these at DAP through final plans. Same thing with compiled plan specs and estimate and design base files. So the design base files are really what people use in their drafting and knowing what Roadway's design is. So those files get referenced in nearly everyone's plan sheets. At preliminary plans, generally we're producing a draft utility conflict list to be presented to the utility specialist. And then coming into, as we noted before, we do have, at advanced plans, we do have design exceptions. At this point in the game, these should be design exceptions that are typically ADA or non-footprint specific. So any footprint specific design exceptions should be signed off on or approved before your DAP phase gate. If they're smaller design exceptions or they're ADA, then you should be seeing those approved at advanced. And if you're not seeing those, then you should be asking if we have any and why they're not there. And after we go to our PS&E, Roadway begins working on the e-bids design package. And this is required to be turned into the TPM about a week before before we put the plans out to be bid. And for those that don't know, the Roadway portion of the e-bids package generally includes cross-sections, finished grade surfaces, and alignments. Once that's complete, we immediately begin working on our construction survey handoff package. As I know before, this is a pretty big package, and one of the reasons that project leaders Should care is because this is a pretty big budget suck. There's a lot of time included in this, and a lot of people don't know everything that goes into it. And so I kind of recommend, if you haven't seen one or don't know why it takes so much time, sitting down with a roadway designer and just having them show you what all goes into it and why it takes so much time. And if you can't find someone that will, write down my information. I'll give you my spiel on why I think it takes so long and give you some examples. But the major parts included in that are quantity calculations, your surfaces from your finished grade, your subgrade, and your top of rock, and grade reports. And the contractors really need all this information to build a project. There's a lot more information in it, but those are the main items that people are looking for. So I stole this from a roadway manager who gave a presentation a while back. I kind of like it. It shows roadway basically as the center of the universe, but that's not quite right. But we coordinate with every unit on the project team, and I think this really is a good example showing all the different units, and they all have to go through us to get to someone else typically. I do have a few specific ones noted, but there's so many coordinations that roadway does, it's hard to keep them all straight. And we are, through our QA/QC process, we have developed a process map. And I was going to put this up here, but the process map is so big that you wouldn't even be able to make out a phrase on it. So it should be finalized within the next 6 months. We are doing coordinations with all units, so that's a good item to really learn where roadway and every other unit ties into each other. But some of the major coordinations you maybe want to look for would be quantities for environmental permitting. One of the big reasons for this is that it can determine your permit type. So if we really know where we're cutting and filling and what kind of quantities those are, we'll be better off with environmental early on. Quantities from material and disposal sites. This really impacts geology and has a footprint issue as well. One of the other major ones is providing surfaces. Well, I like this one, providing surfaces to hydro designers so we can evaluate water quality locations. So once roadway's somewhat finished with a 3D model of their finished grade surface, hydraulics would evaluate that and then determine where our water quality facilities would go. Those water quality facilities can sometimes be very large and have big footprint impact, so it's very important that we see these coordinations early, definitely before DAP, but as soon as we can in the project. Pavement design, this is very important for roadway and the project team to get pretty much a project initiation, because this does determine your design standards and criteria. So, if you're planning on a 2-inch overlay, it could be a 1R project, but if it turns into a full depth rebuild, you're looking at a whole different type of project. So really knowing what that is up front. There are quite a few others, but in the sake of time, I think I'm gonna move on. And if you have questions about those, definitely look through that or, ask me after this. When should you engage roadway? From the beginning and often. Roadway, like I said, roadway's on every STIP project. We are your major coordination unit, so you really want us in there all the time. Anytime you need a formal estimate, roadway's the one that should be providing it to you. Typically, it would be your specifications writer. So if you need something that's to get like approvals in Salem, really it's going through that specs writer because they're most familiar with those unit prices on those bid items. If you need an exhibit, if we're working with outside partners, or if you're even trying to communicate within the project team or to your managers, we provide those as exhibits typically. Contact us prior to every plan distribution. Roadway is the last group or unit to touch the plan set prior to each distribution. I've definitely had some project leaders that have contacted me the day before the distribution is supposed to go out asking how it's going. I'd strongly recommend you start talking to them a few weeks in advance just to see where things are at and see if there's anything that's missing. Because Roadway is responsible for compiling all this stuff, but we can't force other units to get us their information. So if we're not receiving information from other units, then we're kind of stuck, and we kind of really lean on the TPMs to go and get the information or have these people deliver the information to us. And then Anytime there's a major project design coordination, even if you don't think roadway is involved in that coordination, I'd strongly advise you ask them to see if they want to be a part of it. Sometimes those coordinations have impacts to roadway and people don't recognize it because we are intertwined with so many different units. What does roadway need from TPMs? A refined scope and budget is good. So when we kick off projects, if we don't really know what the scope is, it's pretty tough to design to it, and we really end up spending a lot of additional money designing the things that we're not familiar with. And again, with that's kind of tied to budget too there. If, it's not uncommon that we start off projects where we have a set scope, but we can only build three quarters of that project with that budget. So understanding where those are at and really developing, a plan for the project team to refine that scope if we don't have a quality one coming in. Schedule. Kicking projects off on time is pretty critical. We all know that projects take a long time to design, so if we can get them kicked off on time, everyone has adequate time for each other to design the project and have those coordinations. I would strongly encourage that we look for opportunities for advanced investigations. There are certain things that can be done way early and would help these project delivery teams move forward with a clear scope. And there is some documentation around that. I know some of those are related to hydraulics, some are related to bridge, and some are related to pavements, but definitely, work with your area managers to try and find those if we can early on. Verifying that we have full project delivery teams. So one of the things is to verify that we have all required disciplines early at the table. ODOT typically doesn't do streetscape designs, and in my career, it's not been uncommon that we've kicked off an urban job without having someone to do the streetscape design. ODOT may not want the streetscape design, but it's something that our local partners typically want. And so it's best to get those people at the table early so we have them as a part of it. It can really drag a project on if we don't have all people at the table. And then known political issues. So doing a little research before we kick projects off, working with your area managers or your construction people or right away, just to know if we do have any known political issues. Sometimes these can be, promises to the outside world or maybe just cantankerous property owners, but knowing what we're going up against is pretty critical. I am running short on time, so I will try and cut this quick. So I think that's it for those. Roadway fatal flaws. Design exceptions is probably the one that stands out the most in my mind as potential fatal flaw. In the past, these have kind of lingered to the bitter end, and we've really pushed tech services into a corner to try and get these approved late in the game. So we really need to get these approved up front. So if you're not seeing them, we really should be pushing to get those approved sooner. Scope, we kind of talked about already. Having a really clear scope really helps the project budget and the time of the project. Early project promises and assumptions. This is kind of related to scope, but it's really somewhat separate, so I've noted it. So projects often kick off with the assumption that a major project design element will be approved when the delegating authority hasn't been approved or consulted. This can include needing concurrence from partnering local agencies, or it can be internal approvals such as adding acceleration lanes after intersections and getting warrants for signalized intersections. So the real end goal or need is really to identify any approving authorities we need for the scope of the project and get their buy-in early and have documentation of it. Verbal doesn't work. We really have to have documentation and that the approving authority has bought off on this. And then, footprint, really knowing that Roadway has done their 3D modeling prior to DAP, and that we have identified staging areas. Those are ones that can really set your project back if we haven't done those properly. And then tied to that is early coordination. So if we should be coordinating with all units that are on footprint related items. And then probably the last one to talk about here is accelerated timelines. We know that projects will be accelerated due to financial and political obligations, but it does create a higher level of risk for the project in the form of missed design standards, constructability issues, and contract change orders. And one of the things that people need to know when this happens is that the QC process is usually the first thing to be compromised. So we can oftentimes put out a design, but we're not quality controlling it. It's everything we can do to put this project out the door. So just knowing that that's a pretty major risk when we do accelerate these timelines. And with that, I talked quick. I hope it was good. Let me know if you have any questions.
Are there any questions for Wade? Over here. Thank you for making it easy for me.
What kind of time frame do we look at for design exceptions, and can you give us just a brief rundown of how that process goes?
Timeline to develop them or get them approved, or both?
All the way through.
Okay, so developing them, that really starts with, working through your calc book. So the timeline on that can vary. I mean, oftentimes we can identify them way up front. Like, as the project kicks off, we may know that we're going to have design exceptions. So it's pretty tough for me to really give you a timeline on that part of it. But getting them through, writing them and developing the background documentation really depends on what that item is. It could be anything from, 3 to 4 days worth of time to 3 weeks worth of time to formulate all that documentation, because we do have to, document why we're doing these things and how it's a benefit to the public to do this design exception. It's not that we're doing something completely unsafe, that we have the best bang for our buck and why we're doing this. And then as far as getting them approved through Salem, generally those are somewhere between 2 and 3 week turnaround time. And it really depends on how busy they are with other items and how much they approve or disapprove with this. So we should be getting these drafts in and then having your roadway manager approve them or concur with them. And then we go to Salem and say, are you on board with this, before we formulate all that background documentation. So really we identify it, we work it through, talk with our roadway manager, discuss it with Salem. And then if they're on board, then we go through and formulate all the background documentation and then submit it. I know timelines are kind of gray in that. I don't really have a good answer. Yeah.
Any other questions? Okay, Wade, thank you so much. Really appreciate your time.